training today will be over leadership traits and tools. And just to point something out is when it comes to leadership development and training, this is such an important time in your life, just because just speaking from experience, you're not going to get a lot of these types of training that are going to be in-depth, that are going to be catered to you, or free for that matter, in the professional world. So I really hope that you do take advantage of this. And this is the final presidential training, but fret not, we will work with your district officers to prepare other trainings moving forward for different parts and time periods during the year. So if there are things that you want to learn, things that you want to improve at, reach out to your district officers and they will let us know to continue working on that. All right, can we at least make that commitment to communicate what we want to learn? Cool beans. All right. So just some housekeeping items here. This call is being recorded. Sure. God, I hate that response so much. I'm just kidding, Torche. So this call is being recorded, and I will email it out to the chapter presidents once the video is up on YouTube. And if you haven't already done so, please keep yourselves muted for the time being, and we will open up the floor for the second half for questions, and we'll make it a little bit more of a dialogue. So feel free to turn on your cameras and your mics after the presentation. But I don't see any other questions. Let's go ahead and turn it over to our speakers for introductions.
So as Bong said, we're going to be talking about chapter president training, leadership traits and tools. So here we go. My name is Theron Coleman, but I go by TJ. I'm from the Beta Lambda chapter at Eastern New Mexico University in a very small town called Portales, New Mexico. And I am currently serving as the Southwest District President.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Patrick Sullivan. I'm from the Epsilon Nu chapter at University of Massachusetts at Amherst, and I am the Northeast District President. Thank you, Dina.
So a couple of things, just some quick info. Some things you might want to think about as we go is how this relates to the other trainings and how this can help you to become a better officer, how this helps you accomplish your goals, and how you can use your leadership strengths in your personality. And if you have questions, please take notes, and then at the end, like Bong said, we'll have a time for questions, or feel free to shoot it in the chat. So without further ado, I'll get it started talking about some things the chapter president has going on behind the desk. So first of all, you've got to delegate. Now, when I first came into a leadership position, I wasn't completely sure what delegation is. My favorite definition is the act of entrusting a task or responsibility to another person. And I like to follow a 4-step approach whenever I'm delegating. The first step is to foster attachment. You have to provide your chosen delegate or delegates with a reason to care. Otherwise, it's just going to be something that they kind of say, okay, and do to the best of their ability when there's really more they could give to it. Which brings me to the next point, which is inspire commitment. We want to find ways to encourage our chosen delegate to commit to their task and see it through to the fact that it's the best job that they can have done in a timely manner. And then next, you have to provide support. Make sure your delegate have all the required, have all the resources and materials they will need. You can't just leave them hanging, otherwise they're not going to get it done, and they're not going to know if they can trust you next time you ask if they can delegate something for you. And lastly, you have to recognize them, both vocally and publicly. Express your gratitude to your delegates. The more you thank them, the more you recognize them, the more likely they are to get it done again next time. And next is we have to get organized. And there are 4 components to organization. We have time management, efficient planning, workspace, and prioritization. So here's 6 keys to getting and staying organized each day. The first is to set realistic goals and focus on them. Something you can shoot for. If you're shooting for the stars, go for it, but shooting for Jupiter is unrealistic. Set your priorities for each day. Every morning when I wake up, I write down on my phone the things I have to get done and decide what needs to be done first. Tie up any loose ends before heading home. So if you're at the music building, for example, and there's chairs that are still out, if you leave them out, nothing's really going to matter. They'll be out for tomorrow. But if you put them away, then whenever the band director walks in and sees they're put away, they understand that you've handled your job and finished your business. Get a planner and maintain it daily. That's something that I really struggle with because I hate planners. Back in elementary school, they required me to have a planner, and I was like, no, and I threw it in the trash. But I've learned now that if you don't have a planner, you double stack some things, and you've got to like have 2 windows open, one for Zoom and one for Google Meets. You're like, yes. And then next is prioritize your priorities, and that sounds really weird, but that's exactly what I mean. You want to make sure that you target the most important things first, even if they're the hardest things in your day. If you get it done early on, you're going to get so much more done throughout your day. And lastly, when you're done for the day, clean up your workspace. You don't want to leave the music or the meeting room a mess, so the next day whenever there's classes going on, they see all of your KKSI mess. Make sure every time you guys leave something, you leave it better than you found it.
All right, I'm going to jump in now, and I want to talk about maintaining confidence. So the first thing, and I think the most important thing to think of right off the bat, is that your chapter shows you. Sometimes we feel, we question ourselves, we're like, how did I get here? How is it me that is in charge now? But you were chosen, and it was you. It's not about what you ran off of. Like, for example, when you ran, you probably gave a speech, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, and you could have even spoken for like an hour long. But that's not the reason why you were elected. You were elected because of who you are, not because of what you were promising. You can probably think back to a time when somebody asked if you were considering running for president, or when somebody was encouraging you to do so. And remembering that, that's evidence. That's the evidence that you had what it takes for a long time. Your chapter recognizes that you are a capable and valued leader. You might feel deflated or defeated because what you ran off of your platform is not feasible anymore because of a virtual fall semester. But your chapter saw it fit that you were placed at the helm. So don't be afraid to change course. They're going to follow you. They're going to go with you. And if you ever feel like you're overwhelmed with work, you have your chapter with you. They're not just following you, they're alongside you, working with what you're aiming, the direction you're facing the chapter in. You may be in charge per se, but you're not alone at the top of the mountain. When you need help, seek it. Find somebody who you believe can give you good advice. Find someone who can do the task you're struggling with, or show you how to do the task you're struggling with. Because nobody expects you to do all this alone. And not only does nobody expect you to do it alone, nobody wants you to do it alone. Everybody, and really the primary reason a lot of people join this fraternity is because everybody wants to help. Everybody wants to lend a helping hand. And this is a time where a helping hand can be very helpful. And if you really do feel alone, I'm one of the people you can ask for help. TJ is one of the people you can ask. Your national officers, your district officers, your district governors, we're all here to help you in your chapter. That's our main goal. That's our purpose. So never be afraid to reach out. And the next point that I have is about this thing called a 0 day and avoiding 0 days. So I think before I get into what's on the slide, I think that the second hardest thing to do is to start something, to take the first step towards doing something. It's like when you watch the dishes pile up in the sink. It's not because doing the dishes it's hard, and you know that when you start doing the dishes, like it's going to be fine, but like you just don't want to start doing the dishes. That's the problem. But I said the second hardest thing was to start something, because I think that the actual hardest thing is to restart something, to go back to the beginning and just scrap what you've been doing and then start all over. So this idea of 0 days is, if you never stop, you never have to restart in a way. And that's kind of strange, but what a 0 day is when you just don't do anything. Like you're laying in bed and you think, man, like I could get up, but what if I just don't today? What if I just take the day off and just don't do anything? That'll be fine. But you want to avoid that. It's when a full day is going by and you're not doing anything to progress like your work or responsibilities or projects, then you're kind of making a mistake that you want to avoid. And so you just have to do anything. Like if it's almost midnight, or if it is midnight and you're like about to go to bed, but you haven't done anything, do something. Like read an email or reply to an email or fill out one line of a form, start writing a report. You don't even have to finish it. Text one brother or officer and ask them, hey, how's it going? What can I help you with? And then you don't even have to read their response that night. You can read it tomorrow. But you have to do something. And if you do something every day, you get a little bit of a victory. You get a little win. You'll be winning every single day. And you like, who doesn't want to win every single day? But if you don't do it, you're making a mistake. But that's okay, because I'll talk about making mistakes in a little bit. But if you do it, then you get to win. Back to TJ.
Cool. All right, I figured out the unmute function this time. We're good. So the next thing I want to talk about is mastering communication. So really there are three main levels to communication. The first one is the most superficial, and that's informational. Here at this level, it's going to be the least intimate. We're going to be talking about raw information, giving announcements, talking about what's going on in our next event. Things like this would be a president to chapter, president to director of bands or sponsor, and other things where it's just purely, hi, this is happening, we'd like you to be there. Or, hi, this is happening, just wanted you to know. The next level of communication is personal. And at the personal level, it's a lot more subjective. It's based on what happened at the informational level. It's going to be, I really hate that we have to go do a car wash again because it's November. It's going to be something along the lines of brother to membership candidate, brother to an alumni, brother to honorary, whatever it might be. Anything where we're digging a little bit deeper into our social spectrum, if you will. And the personal level is awesome and the best way to build relationships with not so close friends. But we need to be sure to be welcoming of others, because a lot of the time they could say, I really don't like the C major scale. And you're like, oh, well, you know, I'm great at the C major scale. Personally, I love the C major scale. I don't understand why you would think that. And it's still a personal communication, but it can be taken in a more of a, I guess more of a rude way, more of a, hi, my opinion is more valid than yours. And that's never true. Even if your opinion you think is more to you, that's fine, but that's why it's an opinion. So make sure we respect each other's personal views and personal experiences when we share our own with them. And the third level is the rational level. This is the deepest level of communication, and many people don't ever get to this level. I know a lot of people in my chapter that will not get to the rational level no matter how hard you push them. And at the rational level, it's going to be conversation more along the lines of, I noticed at the chapter meeting today, I was really uncomfortable with something you said. Can we talk about that? You're going to dig a little bit deeper and rationalize your feelings with those around you. At this level, it's going to be your closest friends, your brother, your sister, if you don't hate them, or if you do, maybe, I don't know. This could be your KK Psi brother. This could be a sister from Tau Beta Sigma. People who you really trust and want to build a deep emotional bond with. And honestly, there are times when our job as chapter presidents is to be prepared for situations in which we need to utilize more than just one standard level of communication, especially in like conflict resolution and dealing with developing circumstances. So if there's something that needs to happen, like you have a report that a brother is being not so brotherly to another, you might start at the informational level and say, hi, I heard this. And they'll tell you their personal level and say, well, this is what's going on in my life. And then it's your job to push them to that rational level and say, look, let's see how we can find a way to where we both feel comfortable going forward and the chapter isn't hurt by it. And the next thing I wanted to talk about, I mentioned earlier, is recognize. I can't talk about this enough. There's another presentation I give called Leadership Tool Belt, and the recognition is the screwdriver because it just drives everything in your chapter forward. It's one of the most important tools for leadership. Oh, sorry, my internet connection is unstable. Cool. Recognition is one of the most important tools for brothers, and properly recognizing your team can encourage them to be happier, more productive, and more engaged. And some tips for recognizing your team is just be genuine. You don't want to thank someone and say, oh, thanks, because that's facetious. It's not real. You know, you want to be genuine. Thank you for showing up today. Even if it's something that simple, it's not too small. And at that rate, thank frequently. There's never a task that's too small for you to say thank you. Be public about it. Like I said earlier, what I've found is that I can thank brothers no matter how, every day. Thank you for being a brother. Thank you for being a brother in a private chat. And they say, oh, yeah, cool, thanks, no problem. But if I do it in front of the entire chapter, hey, Patrick, thank you for the work that you do for this fraternity. It feels so much better. And then the next time I ask him to do something, it's going to be, what can I do? And the next thing is surprise them. Patrick didn't know I was going to say Patrick's name just then, but look at that. He's smiling. When you surprise your brothers with a thanks or recognition or some kind of reward for the work that they've done, it means so much to them and it hits them real close. In some ways, we can recognize our team, even during a pandemic, is we can write them a letter. You know, I know that's not fun, but hey, we can all use some calligraphy work. We all could use some penmanship skills these days. Set aside time in your meetings to thank brothers for the things they've done in the previous week. Maybe put it in your chapter newsletter that you send out to other chapters or to your district or to your alumni. And my favorite is to create a recognition initiative. And I'm going to shout out Bong and his communications team for this, because right now they're doing this chapter member spotlight. They're doing a DOB spotlight, a music educator spotlight, a sponsor spotlight. And it's so cool to see our national leadership recognizing people in our fraternity and in the field of music that are doing so much. And if it means that much to me, who is a college student, I can imagine how it makes these 20-year DOBs feel to see, hey, you there, you're doing fantastic and we love you, AEA. So, and with that, I will pass it back over to Patrick.
All right, so now it's time to talk about inspiring hope, both in yourself and in your chapter. So we're going to take a glimpse into this thing that exists in my brain that I think everybody should try to have something like this. It's how I handle mistakes and failures. It's called failure limbo. So it's this space in my brain where every time I make a mistake, I stick that mistake right into failure limbo, where it either is a learning experience where I use the knowledge of the mistake and what happened and introspective analysis of why did I do this thing or what went wrong, and I use that to avoid making that mistake again. And the other direction it could go, so it either lives there forever like that, or the other direction it can go in is you repeat the mistake, you lose the opportunity to learn from it, or you squander the opportunity to learn for it, and you just end up repeating the same mistake again. And then now you've got a failure. That mistake, you lost the opportunity to use it as a learning experience, and now it's kind of just turned into a failure. But that's okay, because now you have a new mistake taking its place in failure limbo, the most recent mistake, and that now you have the opportunity again to learn from it, to learn to avoid that mistake. That's so that you don't end up with another failure coming out of failure limbo. So no matter how many times it happens where you make the mistake again and again and again, and you accumulate all these failures, that's okay, because you always have that one most recent mistake in failure limbo that you can use to learn from, and you can use to avoid it in the future or make progress somehow. And no matter how many failures you accumulate, you're not beyond redemption so long as you're seeking to redeem yourself through learning from the mistakes that you've made. So in my head, I've just got dozens and dozens of mistakes lined up, and I'm constantly thinking about it. And, you know, maybe you think about all the mistakes you've made too, and it can be hard to look back and be like, oh, I messed so many things up. But you can also use it to say, well, I messed things up, but because I did, I know how to avoid it in the future now. So I've got all these mistakes lined up, and I'm like, I'm not going to let these fall out of failure limbo. These will be the last of that type of mistake that I make. And if it does happen that I make the mistake again, well, then I got to just keep pushing forward and keep trying to better myself. Because striving for the highest, it doesn't mean never failing. And maybe this is a strange way to look at it, and maybe a strange statement, but failing and accumulating those failures can be a good indicator of somebody who's striving and really pushing themselves to do their best. If you aim for 100%, maybe you can only reach 90%. But when you aim for 90%, maybe you can only reach 75%. Maybe you're failing, but you're going as hard as you can. And if you aim for 100%, then that's the only way to reach your maximum potential that you ever could. Maybe you feel like you're hard on yourself as well. Like you set expectations for yourself that you just can't meet. But I also think that's a good thing too. Failing to meet your own expectations. If you met your own expectations all the time, then I don't think you have high enough expectations for yourself, because you're not pushing yourself as hard as you could. So accumulating those failures can be a good indicator that, you know, you have the right expectations for yourself, that you're pushing yourself to reach the limits that you can reach. I believe that this failure limbo mindset is what allows you to take the small bumps in the road and the little mistakes and really squeeze the value out of them. And you may start to realize, well, I'm not happy that I made this mistake, but now that I have, it's going to prevent me from making a much bigger mistake in the future. You may come to appreciate those little mistakes and the bumps in the road. And I dare say you may even come to find those mistakes valuable or desirable. You may even want to run into the little bumps as the forewarning, so you know how to avoid what may be coming. And so the next point is positivity versus negativity. And before I get into positivity versus negativity, I'm going to go on a little tangent that seems unrelated, but I want to talk about arguments and conflict. And when you have an argument going on between two groups or two people or two parties, it's always going to be based in miscommunication. Each group wants the other group to see things the way they see it through their own eyes, but the argumentative medium is what prevents them from seeing the other person's stance, and you end up in a gridlock, and the argument doesn't get anywhere because communication is no longer effective. So miscommunication and lack of communication is the basis of every disagreement and conflict and argument. So you may want to, as chapter president, you may want to take a neutral stance. You may want to go and be the mediator and moderate all sort of discussion, and you want to be above argument and everything. But neutrality doesn't solve the problem, because neutrality doesn't fix the communicative problem. Neutrality is a dangerous stance, because you'll end up just isolating yourself from both groups. One group will say, why don't you agree with me fully? And the other group will say, why don't you disagree with them fully? And you've lost both sides. Or maybe people will say, well, how do you really feel? I can tell you're playing devil's advocate, or I can tell you're just trying to play both sides, but how do you really feel? And then you end up stuck again. So when it comes to that, instead of aiming for neutrality or something like that, you want to aim for positivity. Maybe you have to take a side. Maybe you have to take the side that you find is more positive than the other, or maybe neither side is really positive at all, and you have to find your own positive stance that you can take with it. But positivity is what you want to be looking for. Now, when I went to National Convention in 2019, I got to see Dr. Tim Lotzenheiser speak and give the keynote presentation. And some of you may have been there and maybe remember that. And he gave an awesome speech. And then 2 weeks later, I got to see him give the same speech again at George N. Park Drum Major Academy. And he tweaked it a bit, because you have, college students, brothers and sisters, and then the other group was high school drum majors. But one thing that was the same in both of his speeches was the relationship between positive and negativity isn't equal. Negativity is far more powerful and more potent than positivity. He actually said that it takes, in his opinion, 9 positive interactions to balance out 1 negative interaction. And, I think that's a really powerful idea that we have to keep in mind. Now, you're probably wondering at this point why this slide is blank, because there's text is not going to appear on the slide. It is blank, because I couldn't dream to boil down positivity into 1 slide or sentence or bullet point. So I just left this slide blank, but I can give you an example of how to maintain positivity in this positive mindset. The previous slide, I was talking about failure limbo, and I had this whole roller coaster of a train of thought that you maybe followed and maybe liked. And I concluded at the end that mistakes and failures, which are things that are just inherently negative, can actually be beneficial and desirable. It was that positive spin that I put on it that allows you to take a whole new perspective to look at it and find value in something that seems undesirable. It allows you to beat negativity with a positive mindset. So I haven't, and another reason why I'm leaving this slide blank is because I don't want to be deceiving you to make it seem like I know everything about positivity and negativity, because I think this slide shows about how much I know about positivity and negativity. I just know that they fight each other. That's really it. because I've never been able to reach 100% positivity or even like 80%, probably not even 70%. I'll be honest, probably not even 70% of the time am I positive. But 100% positivity is where I aim. Like I mentioned before, if you don't aim for 100%, you can't reach your potential of 90%. So I'm aiming at 100%. And I think that that's where we should all be aiming. And I know that you can aim there and you can keep that in your mind and you can reach the positivity that you're aiming, or the maximum positivity that you can ever get when you aim for 100% positivity, because you're all incredible people and capable leaders. And I know that because of what I mentioned earlier. Your chapters chose you. You've been curated by the membership. They said, you are the person that we want to be the representative of our chapter. You are the person that we want to follow, we want you to lead us. So I know that you're capable of this because they saw it in you. And so I know you have it in you. And I know that with a positive mindset, you can work to eradicate negativity from your chapters. You fight negativity with the positivity you have within. And it seems like a hopeless battle with what I said earlier about this 9-to-1 ratio thing. But really, like, when you make a positive comment, you breed positivity. When you have a positive personality or a positive conversation, you brighten someone's day, you make them more positive. It's contagious. Negativity may be contagious too. But if you manage to overwhelm people with your positivity, you overwhelm your brothers with your belief that they have positivity in them, that they have abilities and capabilities to be positive, you can be this radiant positivity star that's powering your chapter through these negative situations. You eradicate negativity because it simply can't exist in an environment so positive and full of people that are driven and want the best for one another because of the brotherly love that exists. Because you have what it takes. You have what it takes to spread that positivity. You have what it takes to be the change that you want to see. I know it and you know it. And I want to like plaster the word positivity on my ceiling so that it's the first thing that I see when I wake up in the morning. And I want to think about positivity when I'm falling asleep so that I dream about positivity all night, because that's the kind of mindset that we need in a world that seems to be getting more and more negative every day. We have the power to be the cornerstone of positivity, to start the spread to our chapters, and then they'll spread positivity to their peers and families, and everything they do the positivity will start to trickle into that. Maybe it seems far reaching, but we can all be the people that start to change the world with positivity. And that's really all I have to say about positivity and negativity. And that's all we have for you today. So it's time for some questions. It's a good question. I don't know. I just winged it. That slide was blank.
All right. Is this the end of your guys' presentation?
It is, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Very good. So let's open up the floor for questions here. So obviously leadership development and just being a president, there's just so much space in between the word itself and what you can actually make of it. So I'm going to ask a question for the audience so far. And this is a safe space. I just want to know, what struggles have you had so far? What failures have you had so far as chapter president? And feel free to turn on your camera and share with us. You can also use the chat box as well. So I'll go ahead and I'll share something. So as VPSA, there's a lot about the position that I thought I knew. There's a lot about it that I don't know. And a failure from myself is that I assumed those who worked with me, those who I work with, would always be there to guide me. But there's a part of that where I have to learn myself. I have to fail first to actually know. So a failure of mine is assuming that things were just going to be a certain way because I've seen it somewhere before, because I saw the past VPAs do it a certain way. So that's one failure of mine. A second is that I assume my skills were spot on for certain things. And I know one area that I very much struggle with even today is my patience level. And I get very frustrated very easily because sometimes I don't know the answer, because sometimes I wish things were okay, but they're not okay, or I wish I could just encourage people to take action, but I can't make people take action, right? So those are some of my failures, but I also know that it's also part of my growth journey, this road that we're on to learn, to be better, to push ourselves and to continue to strive. So I wanted to open up the floor. Who would like to share a certain struggle, a certain difficulty so far as chapter president? Any of our DPs want to share anything?
Sure. I'll say, I know that there is a fine line between being confident and being cocky, but I don't really know where that line is. And I feel like oftentimes I say something like, oh, we can do this. Like, this is a possibility. Like, I believe that this chapter like we can do it, but I don't say it like that in a confident way. It almost comes off as cocky, like, oh, if you can't do it, well, I know I can do it, so we can get it done. And it's something that I oftentimes, like, I just miss it. I say it and I don't even realize what I'm saying, that I'm not saying it in a way that is inspiring people to work harder. I'm saying it in a way that's making people feel bad about, like, their own abilities. And I've been working towards, like, fixing that by just trying to plan out what I say before I say it. And I think, like what I mentioned earlier about positivity versus negativity, I think if I keep positivity more in mind, I'll be more likely to use words that inspire rather than, hurt people.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. Thank you. What else?
Sure, I'll jump in real quick. Yeah, as a chapter president, I think that for the summer of the pandemic, I was very scared. And so I allowed myself to not respond or to not reach out as much as I needed to, I think. And then as district president, I think that in a lot of ways, my biggest failure has been forgetting that not everybody uses their phones for all of their communication. So, I'll send a lot of correspondence like the district governors and council through like GroupMe or Facebook Messenger, and then get an email from Southwest District Governor Tony Castle, who's like, I am not checking that. Please email me everything. And so I think just keeping in mind what the most effective form of communication is has been a struggle for me.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, I'll take a couple more. Anybody willing to share? Go ahead, Ike.
Thank you. Something I've been struggling with is realizing that I don't have to do it all myself, because thank you, TJ. I like you too. Like everyone, I love you all. Sometimes I just kind of am like, oh, this needs to be done. I'll do it. I'm the president. I'll do it. I'll do everything because I'm the president. And I have to realize that I don't have to do everything by myself, that I can delegate, but that's something I've been struggling with.
Mm-hmm. And let's, Mike, remind me to talk a little bit about delegation as well here in just a bit. I wanted to unpack some of the things that the presenters had shared. So thank you for sharing that. What else? We'll take one more. What failures, struggles, difficulties have you had as chapter president so far?
I would say one struggle that I had trouble with was trying to communicate between my advisor and my brothers. Because as president, you kind of have like all the information you have to yourself, whatever you're communicating. But one of the things about when I was first starting out is everybody else doesn't. And when I start doing plans and taking action, sometimes I forget that I have to relay the information to my brothers to let them know what is happening as well. Cause it's like, you're starting from doing everything on your own to being part of a team. And so when I had to get my mindset of, I'm not doing this alone anymore. So I have to keep relaying the information to make sure that things are running smoothly. And that was something that I was really struggling with during my time.
Awesome. Thank you, Malcolm. I appreciate that. Yeah, I would definitely say communication. I mean, it's an ongoing journey for us as leaders and individuals and brothers to learn how to effectively communicate. We think we get to a certain level, and then we aspire, we rise up to a different level or serve at a different position, and we're like, my communication still needs a lot of work. And the hardest part is learning how others want to be communicated with, sort of like what TJ mentioned. So I think a big part of all of this, maybe something that for you to consider spending some time as you are getting to know your executive core, your executive council, you're getting to know your committee chairs, you're getting to know your district officers, national officers, is in a way get to know how they like to be communicated with. And then from there, I would even say, because you can't cater to everybody, but at least set the expectation of here's how I'll be communicating. So for example, the district officers and I communicate a lot through our Slack channel. Now, it's something that there will be things that will have to go through email. There will be things that may be a little bit more unofficial inquiring and will go through text. But at the end of the day, we know that what's the one place we go to if we need information? We go to the Slack channel. So when it comes to communication, there are different theories. There's so many different tools out there for you to use. How can you refine the tool down to maybe one or two tools for your chapter to use so that they know at the end of the day, if they don't know where to go, they know that they can go to that tool. All right. So let's quickly talk about communication. What other tools are you all using that you find to be effective?
I know for me, with the Southwest District chapter presidents, I've really mostly been using our Facebook group because it's something that doesn't go away. And it's something that even if you flood it with memes, which thankfully to the Southwest District presidents in the room, we're not doing that. But if they did, they'd still be able to find things because you can star them and pin them to the top of the feed. Especially like if you're going to put a poll. And what I did at the beginning was put a poll out and said, what's the most effective means of these 7 million different communications we have in 2020? And they said Facebook was basically the easiest from there. So I don't know. I think that GroupMe is another good one because it's something else that, I don't know. I have a friend that does memes on GroupMe, and I can't imagine that. That doesn't seem right to me. That's a Facebook Messenger thing. And so, I think that solid forms like GroupMe and Slack and Facebook Messenger or Facebook groups are the most effective because they don't go away and they're reliable and tried and true.
I appreciate that. So I would definitely say that if you as a chapter president start playing around with some of these tools, some of these ideas, and work with I would say most importantly, work with your executive core, your council, and your DOB and sponsor, and figure out how they want to be communicated with. Your job, and this may be a hot take, but your job is not to communicate to every single brother of the chapter. You have officers that you need to leverage. Because if you put it all on your back, all on your plate, you will probably not show up as the best president, the best yourself that you can be if you are pulling yourself too thin. So if somebody comes to you with a question, like when the district officers come to me with a question, and if I don't know, if it's not in my wheelhouse, I will CC them on an email, but I will share that question with somebody else. Put the ball in somebody else's court. Whose job is it to answer this question, to know this information? Is it your job to know everything about programs, service projects, about musicianship, about leadership development programs, about chapter meetings? That's just too much for one student to handle. And if you want to handle that, that's cool. But you also have to think about the expectations you are setting for future presidents. Is it fair to set that expectation for the next president and the next president? Are you setting them up for failure or success? And you have to ask yourself that. Because the things you do as leaders, especially as chapter presidents, sets a precedent for future leaders. So how can you really refine down the goal and the role of the president? What are those roles and responsibilities? And if you're unsure, there was a training session that two of our DPs did that you can find on our YouTube channel to learn a little bit more about those roles and responsibilities. And so my last piece here about the communications is, if you yourself need more training, if you would like more guidance, let us know. Let your district governors, your council, national council know, so that we can cater certain programming and lessons to that piece. Okay? So the next thing I wanted to bring up and unpack a little bit more here is that delegation part. Who here struggles with delegation? Amen. Yes. I mean, all of us at some point, right? Because sometimes it's so, you're like, I don't get what you don't get. Let me just do it. Because me teaching you how to do it is going to take more time, right? So how do we find that balance? So I wanted to, I guess, open up the floor to hear what about delegation is hard for you? Yeah, go ahead, Ike.
I forget very much a lot of the time that people cannot read my mind and that they don't know that I want them to do something without me telling them. And I just forget that a whole lot.
I appreciate that. Bathtub. So let's hear some other examples as well. Is it Arden? What's up, sir?
Yeah, it's Arden, and I have a problem with overthinking about who has contributed the most in the past couple of days. So should the people who have contributed the least, should they be delegated more tasks, and who will like communicate better for tasks, or so those types of things that I just think of, and they kind of confuses me in my head. I have to think about all that when I try and delegate tasks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. I appreciate that. Jacob, did you have something?
Yeah, for me, I like to be really hands-on, and so sometimes, coming up with different projects and different ideas, and having to, let somebody else take over that can be a struggle for me.
Mm-hmm. I 100%. Yeah, I feel that. We'll take a couple more. Sorry. We'll go with Dina, and then Andra. Did you have something?
Yeah.
Okay.
So having kind of learned how to delegate, I've come to this new problem where I'll try to micromanage the officer trying to do something, because in my mind, I was like, I have this vision and I have this thing that I want done. And for me to like put that trust in someone, it can be very difficult. So now I'm trying to learn how to not micromanage. So we've overcome the obstacle of delegating, and now comes the obstacle of not trying to micromanage my director as they do things.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's such a funny cycle, because I'm sure we can remember examples where we were micromanaged. We're like, I want to fight you right here. Like, you will catch hands. So, and then now we're learning how to not be that same person. So I think it's natural. I don't think we need to be mad at ourselves, but I definitely think that it's healthy to recognize that. So thank you for sharing, Dina. Andra.
Yeah, it's pretty much kind of what she said. Normally with me, it's like, okay, I tell somebody, I need to do this. And when I say it, it's kind of like, I want things done, swift. And it's like, it's either not done fast enough or not done when I want it done. So sometimes I tend to like, you know what, I got it. Because like, I just do it. If you can't get it done how I want it or when I want it, it's just like,
Mm-hmm. I definitely feel that. I'm not sure if any of you have dealt with the, maybe you yourself or others have that kind of that passive aggressive tone. You're like, okay, no, it's fine. I'll get it done. It's all good, right? We start to really put pressure on our relationships with our brothers and our other officers. So, and I'll let some of the other DPs jump in here as well, but something that I have learned that I find effective is to ask questions like, hey, do you have time to get this done by date, by this time? Or if someone says, yeah, I can help. A lot of times, I mean, like we as band kids, as the servant leaders we are, we're always like, yes, I'll help. But sometimes you need to help that person unpack. You're like, do you actually have the time, without being condescending? We're like, all right, so I need this done by this time. This is what I'm looking for. So like Dina said, there's this vision. Are you bringing them into the vision? Or are you bringing them into the vision creation process so that they can be a part of that vision themselves? So I would always say, focus more on clarification questions when someone does say, I want to help. And Arden, you had mentioned something about not knowing who to go to. I think at the end of the day, if something needs to get done, and if people are raising their hands like, I want to help, you got to go with those people, right? If other people don't, then I think there will be time for that. But when things need to be done, I think you need to go with the people that raise their hands. Cool. So DPs, what other thoughts do you have when it comes to delegation?
Yeah, I was going to respond as well. I think that I agree. What I like to do is keep a record of who's done what. Generally, that way, one, I know who to call whenever something isn't done on a deadline, and two, that way I know who not to ask next time, because I like to give. I mean, I think the best thing you can do is give, if if you don't have brothers that are willingly stepping up and saying, yes, me, please let me do whatever the task is, then try to make sure you cover all of your brothers. Even if you think there's brothers that won't do the job as well, give them a shot, because maybe they're more quiet than they are effective. And then I also think, I can't remember there was another point that I had, and it's gone. But yeah, I think that any opportunity we have to let our brothers serve, we shouldn't take that from them. Give them that shot. Even if you don't have faith in them, is that their problem, or is it ours for not having faith in our brothers? So give everybody their shot. And if they don't get it done, then you know next time to go to someone else.
Appreciate that. Let's see, Alphonse. Let me make sure I get all these comments here. Okay, so Tarsh says, I have a problem when I give a person and take longer than it should, so I tend to get impatient and start doing it myself. Okay, yeah. So impatience is something that I think naturally we're all going to have to work on, right? We should just go ahead and write down our list of things to do. Like, right, patience is one thing one virtue I need to put on my 2021 goals, because 2020's, we've had enough for 2020, right? So that's something that we all have to work on. And I think, again, at the end of the day, if it's more about you not feeling comfortable or feeling impatient, I think, again, we just have to work on our communication skills of clarifying and asking those questions like, when can we get this done by? Do you need help? And it's something that we're going to have to continuously work on. But the most important thing I would say is make note of when you do get impatient. Go back and look at how did you ask them for help? How did, what information did you give? So I would say the most important thing is that noting that it will happen. You will get impatient, but making a note of what is going through your thought process, and how you communicated. Alphonse shared here, my biggest issue is that I don't want to inconvenience people, burden them by delegating things to them. Okay, definitely. Who else has that fear? Yeah, especially like the DOB or sponsors. Anybody that I feel like is busy and I don't know what it is, but there is that fear that you don't want to inconvenience people. So what are some ways that people have been successful about working around that fear?
Honestly, just do it. It's like, if it's like for the DOB or sponsor thing, I don't know. Even chapter presidents have to sometimes delegate to the DOB or sponsor. And sometimes what you're delegating to them is very scary if it is a disciplinary type thing. And honestly, the longer you wait, the longer it takes for it to get done, and two, the less likely it is to get done by the time you need it to. And when it comes to brothers that you're afraid of burdening, if they didn't want to work for the bands, if they didn't want to do the job that's tasked for being a brother, then they wouldn't have taken the oath. If there is a busy person who's preparing for their recital, it's tomorrow at 3 p.m. and you need them to get something done by 2:30 p.m. tomorrow, maybe go with someone else. If it's somebody that's genuinely busy, maybe go with someone else. But if it's somebody that you think that the only one that can handle the job and it needs to be done, just do it. And if they can't do it, they'll say, hey, I don't got time. But other than that, sometimes it's just got to be like, I'm going to get yelled at, but I'm going to do it anyways. And that's just the way it's got to go.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, a lot of times, if there are certain individuals that you have greater fear when it comes to inconveniencing them, I would say, if it's an urgent thing that needs to be done, don't focus on those individuals, but make a note of who those individuals are and have conversations with them and say, here's some things that I've been wanting to ask for your help, and moving forward, is this something that you would be interested in? I mean, sometimes we just kind of have to do a little bit of digging as leaders, and because maybe sometimes they're not raising their hands, or maybe you may feel that you're inconveniencing them because they don't know that you want them to help. Sometimes that one-on-one reach out, maybe just what they needed, maybe, sort of reinforce it like, oh, I should be helping out. I do want to help out. So the last part that I wanted to end on here for this session is when it comes to being chapter president, being a leader, there's a part of our job that comes with promoting the growth of our executive council, but also for future leaders. So I wanted to open up the floor for any DPs, anybody who wanted to share thoughts on the best practices to promote the growth of your officers and for future leaders. Oh, sorry, Ike.
Oh, no, it's okay. I just have a crippling need to always raise my hand and be polite at all times, so it's fine. Something that Sarah, one of the NAD governors, suggested to me was, don't be afraid to be transparent with your chapter. So I was like, oh, thank you, Dina, I love you very much. Because I'm like, oh, I do everything for my chapter. They don't know what I do. And she's like, be transparent with them. Sit them down and say, listen, this is all the paperwork I have to do. This is what I do on a regular basis for the chapter. Be transparent. That way your future leaders are prepared for when they have to step in that office, because you can't be there. You can't do it for the rest of your life as much as you want to.
Yeah, so, and I definitely appreciate that. And it's like one of those things where we kind of have to really learn about ourselves as well, because we have to unpack what fears we have to get over in order for us to be that person to show up, to encourage and motivate others. So thank you for sharing, Ike. When it comes to motivating others and promoting the growth, what other practices, advice do you have? Anybody on the call? Oh, Patrick, sorry.
Oh, no problem. I was going to say, try to equate what you do to what they do. So if you have a brother that you think would be a good fit for like president or VPM or something, try to take what they are doing now and say, essentially, well, what I do is exactly what you're doing, but maybe on a little larger scale. So if they're like a committee chair, you go to the committee meeting and you say, well, that was a great committee meeting. You ran that meeting really great. It's the same thing as running chapter meetings. The chapter meetings are just a little bit bigger. There's more people. And so you sort of take what you do down a notch and raise what they do up a notch, so they meet on level grounds, and then they can start to believe in themselves that they can do that. And then they can, with less fear, or hopefully no fear would be the goal, run for an office like president and have the confidence that they can do it, because it's what they've already been doing.
I definitely appreciate that. So just something to chew on here is, so there were lots of questions that were submitted about how to focus on some of the up and coming stars or leaders in your chapter without seeming like you're picking favorites. I think one, it's healthy that you recognize that you don't want to pick favorites, because that leads to a lot of contention, that leads to a lot of negative, it builds a negative culture within the chapter. But let me put this maybe in a sports term or something, like on a football team, is everyone meant to be a quarterback? Probably not. Like, it would not be a very effective team. So when it comes to promoting the growth of other brothers in your chapter to be future, because I mean, as a president, I hope that you realize that a part of your success, a part of your role, is to train people to take over for you. One of the worst things you could do is to exceed, do really well, and then leave the chapter hanging. Now, sometimes it's not intentional because you were so focused on that forward movement, but sometimes we also have to think about a year in advance, 2 years in advance, and start to pour into others and really build that bench. Now, we pick the best of the best from our band programs. We realize that. But when you see, if there are people that are raising their hands and saying, I want to serve, I want to lead at a higher level, or people that you see with the traits that match what each position asks for, I think it is your duty as a brother, as an officer, to at least have the conversation with them, like, are you interested in this? And if so, can we have further conversations about it? But you also have to think of the equity piece and making sure that if others come to ask for you for help or guidance, that you don't say no. That doesn't mean that, let's say, if someone comes to you and you know for a fact, like, this person has no business leading a meeting. Doesn't mean they're a bad person, but they have no business leading a meeting. Well, one, I hope that you would at least have the conversation, hey, look more into this, read the Constitution. And then you're also able to be honest with them. And I think that's gonna be one of the hardest pieces, is being honest with, like, hey, you know, I've noticed this, and that, and I think that it would be more effective if, you know, you really thought about working on your patience, or how you speak to people, or Robert's rules, right? So really consider the equity piece. So something just to give you some insight here, is we're looking at the district and national level. I think we all realize, we all see that the representation on these levels isn't really representative of our fraternity, right? So ways that we're looking at the equity piece is, how can we provide training, how to run for district officer, how to run for national office, so that people who are interested can show up, and we're relieving some of those barriers. So to take that at the chapter level, how can you relieve some of those barriers? How can you make sure that if people want to learn more about being a president, they can? One great way, taking the recordings of these videos, sending them, say, if you are interested in running for chapter president or chapter office next year, watch these videos. Do the work, prepare yourselves. Make those connections. If you have a incoming freshman, sophomore, whoever, who's really interested, but they're unsure, help them make those connections with the current officers. Okay? And when it comes to preparing your chapter, or your officer corps, your executive council, if I can leave you with one piece of advice, is that while there is the urge to want to fix and do everything, if you spend more time putting energy, knowledge, and wisdom into your executive corps, I think your chapter will be far better off, because you will not only just have one person at the top trickling down, but you're feeding more horizontally and letting them do the work as well. And from there, you're also building future presidents, future VPMs. All right, so how can you do that? Each chapter, each district is different culturally, it's different in the band program, it's different in structure. But you spending time putting forth energy and wisdom and knowledge and love into your fellow brothers who are serving right now. Because I'm sure you remember when you first step into a position, just like if you're a first year chapter president, you kind of don't know what you're doing sometimes. Right? You're like, I'm kind of making this up, especially right now. So how can you relieve some of that uncertainty for people? Okay. So we are at, 2:01 Central Time. This call is being recorded. This conversation, unfortunately today, is coming to a close so that you all have time to digest and come up with further questions. I highly encourage you to leverage your district officers, because they are learning just like you are. On the national level, we are learning just like you are as well. Let's take it one day at a time, one problem at a time, and continue to ask questions so that we can work together to solve these problems. Right? So can we all make a commitment to continue to ask questions? Cool. Well, I appreciate it. If you have a moment, please give thanks to TJ and Patrick for all their hard work, their presentation today. We will work with our district officers to come up with further trainings for November, or probably in November and February as the different cycles go through. But just a quick plug, the chapter personnel report is due by the end of September. We will have office hours with Aaron from headquarters to help you fill those out. So we'll release dates about that fairly soon here. But if you have questions, please reach out to your council, your governors, and myself, okay? Thank you, TJ. Thank you, Patrick, on a great presentation. And thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your Sunday.